Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of 1 Samuel. Today we come into chapter 19 and we're examining what happens when Saul once again goes after David. These events are going to take place shortly after the events of chapter 18. And it's going to show a number of different levels of the way that Saul has deteriorated into paranoia and into an unbalanced approach with David and with others around him, as others are going to see that Saul is not making the most rational or the right decisions with things. And so let's look at some things from chapter 19 as we look at some lessons from the chapter today. Let's start with Saul. And notice the fact that Saul really does float back and forth between what he's going to do and who he's going to be and how he's going to do it. In verse number 4, Jonathan is going to tell Saul in regard to David that Saul should not sin against David because David has done absolutely nothing against him. And he's correct. David has gone out of his way to not do anything against Saul. And yet still Saul has had this desire to kill him and has had this desire to remove him. Saul is going to respond in verse 5 and say, "As the Lord lives, he shall not be killed." And that will last for a little while. But then in verse 8, there's going to be war again between the Israelites and the Philistines, and David is going to go out with the army, and he is going to be the one who is leading the army when they deal a mighty blow to the Philistines, and they win another battle, and the Philistines flee, and now all of a sudden, Saul wants to kill David again. And we have this idea of a distressing spirit from the Lord, and yet this distressing spirit, we would call it a depressed spirit. That Saul was depressed. It doesn't mean that there was this evil spirit upon him that was controlling his actions or anything of that nature, but rather that Saul was distressed. He was depressed. He was downtrodden, and in his depression, the answer that he comes to is that if he can just get rid of David, all of his problems will go away. And so Saul is once again going to try to kill David in verse 9. And you're going to once again have to deal with David fleeing from the presence of Saul. Now notice, David still has not responded in kind. He has not said that he will not come before Saul again or any of these things, even though Saul has now on multiple occasions sought his life. Instead, David does flee. And he flees home to his wife, Michal, who is Saul's daughter. And as he comes back, Saul is going to send messengers chasing after David. And yet his wife, and this is the second area for today, his wife is going to protect him. She is going to choose sides. And that side is going to be the side of David, not the side of her father. As a matter of fact, 2 of Saul's children, Jonathan being the other one, are going to side with David. They are going to take care of David and watch out for David over the wishes of their father, which also shows the unrighteousness and the way that Saul has become unhinged in many ways in his response and in his actions toward David. Michal is going to tell David in verse 11 that if he does not get out, if he does not leave, if he does not save his life that night, he is going to be killed. He will not have another chance to escape. And so David will leave at his wife's request, and she will go through this elaborate ruse to try to give him as much of a head start as she can. And Saul is going to come in, and Saul is going to finally ask why she would turn against him, why she would let his enemy escape. Verse number 17, and thereby turn her back on him. Now, Michal in this instance does not tell the truth. She somewhat covers herself by stating that David threatened her and said, "Why should I kill you?" But that wasn't true. And it goes back to the fact that Michal is somewhat torn between her love and her loyalty for David, and the fact that she doesn't want to turn against her father either. She doesn't want her father mad at her. And yet here Michal is going to cover for David, and at the same time slightly throw David under the bus. That being said, we come to the third area of chapter 19. And maybe this one is the most important of all of them in this particular chapter. And that is the fact that not only is Jonathan going to seek to protect David, and Michal is going to seek to protect David, but God is going to work to protect David as well. And beginning in verse number 18, David is going to flee back to Samuel. Samuel is a very old man at this time. And David is going to flee to him. He's going to tell him everything that has happened. And Samuel is going to take him to Naioth to hide, as it were, but also to lay low for a little while. Now, word is going to get back to Saul as to what it is that is going on. And Saul is going to send 2 different levels of messengers to David. And as soon as they come before Samuel, God is going to utilize them, and they're going to begin prophesying. Now, this isn't Samuel doing something to them, but rather it's simply God responding and God protecting David from the messengers of Saul. And they are going to begin prophesying. Finally, Saul is going to go out himself because his messengers have not been doing the job. And so Saul is going to go himself, and the Spirit of God was upon him also, verse 23, when he comes. And he is going to go on and prophesy. He's going to follow the exact same thing. God is even going to do it to Saul. Saul will even go so far as to strip himself naked and to prophesy before Samuel in the same manner. And this is going to be the second time that people are going to ask, is Saul also among the prophets? Now, Saul is not among the prophets, but it fulfills a purpose. He is going to realize, and he is going to be shown that God is the one in control, and that Saul will not have the ability to overcome the Lord's anointed, because at this point, the Lord's anointed is David. So we see a number of things here in chapter 19. They're not necessarily deep philosophical things, but there are things that you see in this chapter regarding friendship, regarding loyalty to what is right over family, and regarding the fact that God has means of protecting his people. Those things are important for us to see and important for us to remember. And I hope that these things have been beneficial to you. Next time we will come back and we will begin examining 1 Samuel chapter 20. But until then, have a great day.